lights. This is not good. We're not supposed to have this problem. No, no, no. No, no, no. Everything looks so normal. Okay, pjnet.tv, green light again, we're good. And we are running our bumper. It is 9 p.m. on the East Coast. And we're recording this, and we have this streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Our guest is waiting. Our chat room's waiting. Why not? Let's go ahead and start a countdown to Studio 33 Alpha. Well, good evening and welcome to pjnet.tv. I'm your host, Coach Prasick, and I'll be honest with you, I was a little frosted when I first hit the stream button. It didn't sync up. It was yellow and red and all that, and we just had the phone company out here day after day after day checking on things, but it turns out that it just took a little extra time to get in sync. At least I hope that is the case. Folks, it is the, I believe, third Thursday of the month. Now, many of you know what that means, but if you don't, we're very blessed to have a wonderful team of programming partners here at pjnet.tv. Oh, by the way, are you watching this on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube? We're so glad you joined us. If you're welcome to watch it there, but if you go to pjnet.tv, there's a chat room and fellowship there. Some friends are waiting to meet you and all that. But Katherine, welcome back for your monthly gig here, as we do every third Thursday. And I read your blog earlier today, and I found it very fitting, but I don't want to steal your thunder. Why don't you tell us what's on your mind?
Thank you, Mark. It's good to be back, as always. Did want to make one comment about you saying you were a little bit frosted when you turned things on.
I'm
That's a
going to
good
raise
thing to
up in
be
my
on a
chair.
very hot day.
Well, you don't know the heat. You're well north of me, Miss Pasour. It's pretty bad down here.
Well, it's not as hot here as it is in Florida, that's for sure.
Hmm.
But we have plenty of hot days and the
Yeah,
humidity
yeah.
too.
We're down into double digits here lately.
Mm. Well, that's better than triples,
We have those
definitely.
too. We have those too.
Yes. Well, thank you for reading my blog, Mark, our coach. I greatly appreciate that. And like me, probably you saw a lot of news last week focusing on 9/11, September 11th, 2001. And it seemed like, of course, I guess it was more because it's been 20 years, but it also seemed more personal this time. One thing that my local station did was they interviewed people who had family members that were either involved or and survived or passed away on that fateful day. And so that made it more real, even though it's no doubt that it was real, but that made it more real because it made it personal.
Hmm.
There was just so much coverage. But one of the documentaries that I watched was really so interesting. It was actually 60 minutes, and they focused on the New York Fire Department, and that was something new. Although I knew they were very much involved, this coverage was new. I'd not seen it before, and it helped me to recognize the sacrifices that so many people made. Of course, we know that the people that were killed, uh, they made the ultimate sacrifice, of course, and their families have also suffered greatly. But the fire department was a little bit different. They were called in to respond to the emergency, and over 750 people reported to the Twin Towers that day in New York, and 343 of them were killed in action, I guess you should say. And Jesus told his disciples that greater love has no man. He would lay down his life for his friends. And of course, Jesus made that ultimate sacrifice. But that's what the people on Flight 93 that crashed into the
Hmm.
Pennsylvania field, as well as these firemen and women who were killed on that day. And the 60 Minute interviewed a great number of people who were involved that survived, and also showed a lot of footage that we'd never seen before because they had more access. And they warned ahead of time that much of the footage would be painful to
Mm-hmm.
watch.
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing on that day,
I think we all
Coach?
remember. I was
I think so
actually
too.
out in the Gulf of Mexico at that time. Twice a year, I would take my employees out charter fishing. And we were 25 miles out in the Gulf when the first plane hit, and we thought, oh, some idiot Cessna pilot trying to learn how to fly. But when the second one hit, we realized the captain, came down and told us. And I remember, well, I think we all do. But we had trouble getting back to shore because some of us were carrying weapons, uh, and and the police and the Coast Guard and all the authorities were there at the dock. And when you're that far out, you're actually outside of the continental United States, so you're actually importing a
Mhm.
firearm at that point. Technically, was not. I just remember being thankful that our president was who our president was because we almost had another president.
Yes, that was one of those elections that was very contentious.
Yes.
Yes, and I think Florida actually played a big part in
Oh
that
man,
election.
everybody figured out Tallahassee was the capital. Man, there were TV trucks everywhere, but most people don't even think
Mhm.
of Tallahassee as the capital of Florida. They think Orlando, Miami, something like that. But no, Tallahassee is
Mhm.
the capital.
That's right. I remember that from my social studies days, U.S.
Hmm.
history days. And you're right. I think most of us do remember exactly what we were doing when we found out. I was on the way to work when the first plane hit, and like you, thought it was everyone thought it was a small plane that just accidentally crashed, and then suddenly it became very, very real. And one of the my first, actually all the televisions were on all over where I work, and early on they were showing the people that leaped from the buildings at the
Yeah,
Twin Towers, and then they stopped because that was so
right.
graphic and painful, especially for the people that survived
Yeah.
and knew that one of their family members had done so to escape the flames. But that was one of the things that they showed on 60 Minutes. But they also interviewed a great number of families of the survivors. And the common theme of those people that were survivors, I'm sure they went through much grief and
Hmm.
anger at first, but the common theme that they shared now was that we should never forget, certainly, what happened. But we also need to remember these people that perished by working to make the world a better place so things like this won't happen again. And I really admired them for having been able to have that perspective on it. And they also vowed that this was a situation where we should be kind to one another and pay it forward. And a lot of them have gone into different types of service work just in memory of their lost loved one. And then, of course, they stressed the importance of loving one another. So that was the theme of my blog. You know, how can we love one another? And then, of course, the question is, can we? Because we're obviously not doing it right now.
Well,
So, can we learn to love one another? And if you don't mind, I'd like to read just one portion of scripture that I shared in my blog. This is from 1 John. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his Son, his one and only Son, into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we love God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our friends. So that's the great love that God has for us and that Jesus had for us because he was willing to sacrifice himself for us. And that's what all those firefighters did on 9/11. They knew the danger. And yet, one of the people that they interviewed on 60 Minutes, the commentator asked him, said, "How many of your people refused to go into the Twin Towers when they were ordered to?"
Hmm.
And the captain answered, "Not one of them refused. They all went willingly." And of course, after the first tower collapsed, those that were headed into the second tower knew
Yeah.
even more so what the danger, because no one expected the towers
No,
to collapse.
that was
Certainly not
not.
that quickly.
No.
There had never been historically, there had never been a metal building built as structurally sound as those
Right.
were that had collapsed. So that was not expected. Although one engineer, he began to watch the structure of the building, he began to see that the walls of it were becoming obviously dangerously moving in ways that they wouldn't have, and he predicted it. But of course, they still went in, and there were two names mentioned, and I think it means something when we say someone's name out loud. At least it's meaningful for me. But there were two men, two New York firemen. One was named Oreo Palmer, and the other was Peter Gansey. And both of these men were in the second tower. And Mr. Palmer was trying to make it up to the level where the fire was to see if there was a pathway around it to get on up to the over 1,300 people that were trapped there in the second tower. And he was especially fit. He'd been won all sorts of fitness awards, and he was especially fit. And they were able to use the elevator for a part. They were still functioning some in the lower levels. But then when he got to the place where the elevators were not working, he was running up the stairs. And he made it into the somewhere in the seventh, 77th floor, somewhere in that vicinity. And he was in constant communication with those on the ground. And he was just about to find one stairwell. He found one stairwell that was functioning, and he was just about to go up it when the tower collapsed. And just to hear his voice, to see pictures of him, his big smile, they showed pictures of him, big smile, and how dedicated he was. And then the other one, there were many that were mentioned, but the other one I recall is named Peter Gansey, and he was a captain. So he was down on the ground because, as in a lot of situations, they keep the leaders down to direct.
Mm-hmm.
He was down on the ground directing his men. And when the first tower collapsed, his group of men and women were in the second tower, and he went in to save them, to tell them to get out. He went in to help find them, tell them to help get out. But the tower collapsed while he was in there. So these people knew the danger, and even when the danger got even far beyond what was expected, they still went in. They made the ultimate sacrifice, not only for the people that they knew, but for strangers, people that they didn't know.
Right.
So it wasn't just their family or their comrades that they were working with. They went in the face of danger. And, men in our military do that. I don't know if JD is in the chat room or not, but he served in the military, and we all know people that have, and they are willing to make the same type of sacrifice. They sign up knowing they are going into harm's way, and they may have to make the ultimate sacrifice. So just have so much admiration. And that's why it seems so much more personal to me this year, especially to learn the stories of these two men, Oreo Palmer and Peter Gansey. So toward the end of my message, I had some questions for us to ponder as as to how we can make a difference. And first question was, how can I love my neighbor? I mean, it's easy to say love your neighbor, but how can we do it? And how can I love my neighbor even if I don't agree with their belief or if they don't agree with me? How can I still love them? How can I show love to those who need it most? What can I do to make our country and our world a better place? Because I think we all recognize, even though we don't want to say it out loud, that we can make a difference. Each one of us can do actions that will make a difference. And then the last one is, what am I willing to sacrifice in order to love my neighbor and make this world a better place? So what do you think? I know there's something going on in that mind of yours.
Well, Catherine, have you ever given thought of how you would react? Maybe, I hate to call them fantasies, but sometimes in my mind I think of how would I respond in a crisis situation? Because we all would like to think that we would do the right thing, that we would do the brave thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I've said it before, I think it's worth repeating. Heroes are born of crisis, but so are cowards. And I don't think we actually know what we would do until that moment is thrust upon us and we just act on instinct. And as you mentioned, the brave men, those firefighters, they had a choice. You know, the victims that were in the building when the planes plural struck, they were just at work. They didn't sign up to go get in the path of a plane missile.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't choose that, but the firefighters chose the danger. They ran toward the danger while others were running away. The other thought, and I don't want to say that this is good because of the redeeming characteristics that I'm about to point out, because we shouldn't have to have that happen. But many people neglect to see the good because the bad is so tragic. You've already pointed out some of them. But I would also point out that that day there were no blacks or whites or Republicans or Democrats. There were no Jews or Christians. There were no Baptists or Methodists. We were all together, pulling together. And,
That's right.
And that is a good thing. It is unfortunate that it takes a circumstance like that to get us to pull together. But there was also another good thing that happened that would not have happened except for the circumstances. That Sunday, you better go to church early because there was standing room only.
Yes.
It
I
drove
remember.
us to our knees. Where you found a steeple, you would find the people. Yeah, I thought of that one
Yes.
this morning, Catherine. I've
I'm impressed.
been waiting on a chance to pop that one in there.
Well, I'm glad you had a
Um,
chance.
but unfortunately, the shelf life of that acknowledgement on how dependent we are on the providence, the protection, and the sovereignty of God. The shelf life was too short. Soon we drift back into our comfort, our false sense of self-sufficiency,
Our
and
complacency.
our
Hmm.
complacency, our belief that tomorrow we make our plans for tomorrow. People that made their
And that
plans for
we are in
today could have.
control.
Oh yeah. Um,
Yep.
but there were some redeeming things that remind us that the goodness of God, that potential is in all of us. but it just needs to be awakened. It needs to be activated. If you're not a believer, how would you know what love is? Because God is love.
Mm-hmm.
But for believers, we acknowledge that at some point in our life, but then circumstances, relationships, careers, it's only in the times of crisis that we have a choice to draw nearer to God or to double down on our own ridiculous, inadequate self-sufficiency.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of
And
heroes
it's
out
really
there.
sad that it takes a crisis to wake us up. It really is. But but you're right. Love comes from God, and we love because He first loved us. And He created us with the capacity to love. So what a gift. It's painful sometimes, but what a gift.
Catherine, I know we've run out of time, but yeah, I was reflecting on a blog you had written, I don't know, a week or two ago, about the house where you grew up,
Mm-hmm.
and the thought crossed my
Still working
mind.
on it.
Yeah, well, I'm that's what I was thinking. Is I admire you for trying to bring that house back to in a state that you remember it anyway, or that it could be inhabited. But um, that house is, I think, older than you are, right?
Yes.
And I was wondering
That's
to,
pretty old.
I know, but back when the dinosaurs were, um, I'm wondering if that house, if those walls could speak, I wonder what they'd say.
Oh, I wouldn't want it to be made public, whatever they'd say. Houses have lots of secrets,
There are. Uh,
but there's lots of love there too.
I
Every
hope
every
that
home.
your home was a legacy of love, and I guess my message to you, Miss Pasour, is that the walls of that house can't talk. You are its voice, and I hope that you share with the generations coming up the benefits, the virtues, the values, the love that your family has shared in that house and in that home. And because you're quite the master of words.
Well, thank you.
Well,
Trying.
always trying. Well, Catherine, I can't wait until we get together again about this time next month. I appreciate you dedicating your blog. Sometimes you wonder, what else can I say that hasn't been said? Yeah, it's like when
Hmm.
I get the opportunity to lead a Bible study, substituting for a regular teacher, I tend to get opportunities on Easter, and
Christmas.
Christmas, and this is the most challenging Sunday school, Bible study. It's like what can I possibly share with you that Jesus was born, Dave,
Hmm.
Mary and Joseph, and King Herod. I mean, what? Uh, but you provided a personal and unique insight, and I think that 9/11 is seared into our hearts, or it should be.
Hmm.
But the only disappointment I've seen is there was another crisis on 9/11 in Benghazi, Libya, and it's almost like the Korean War. It's been like forgotten when
Right.
we were directly attacked, and 4 men lost their lives, and several men, and many of them defending the others. We have some brave men and women in our armed forces, and thank God for them. Our first responders, our police. There's so many national heroes. I yearn for the day when the world will look up to them again, as we do today. But many have portrayed them as the problem. And sad day that we've come to. Catherine, we appreciate you sharing. You're wonderful. We appreciate you being part of our PJNet family, and can't wait to hear next month what you'll bring to us. And in the meantime, we just love you, and we'll see you in the chat room. How about that?
Love you too.
All
Good
right.
night.
Well, folks, there's a new view. That's one of the many cameras that we have here in the Eagle's Nest, the broadcast facilities here at pjnet.tv. In just a few moments at the bottom of the hour, we're going to take a little trip around the Cross W. So if you're in the chat room, stay inside the wire, folks. Don't go anywhere. And before I leave, I would like you to ask yourself two questions, or I would challenge you to ask yourself two questions. The first one is, well, what is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? The second one is, when was that? We've just heard accounts of how brave men and women in boldness ran toward the danger. As you reflect on those two questions, I hope that you'll never be satisfied with either answer.